Hey there, Wendy here with Jazzydoodledesigns, and in this week's color along, you guys chose the Albrecht Durer watercolor pencils, Prismacolor pencils, and this Rita Berman Asia book. And I have chosen, I should have marked it, this guy. This little hawk. So grab your pencils and let's go. Hello everybody. I am excited to be here today. I have had an extremely busy last couple of weeks. I have had some company in town that's been really awesome. Some of my family's popped in and spent time with me, and so I have to apologize. There are things about this video that are not ideal. Like, for example, I am now covering the pencil that I'm using. I'm still trying to get used to this system. I really like it because when I put up the little, like the little pop-ups that tell you what color it is on the screen, I like that, but it takes me a really, really long time to do it. And I feel like I end up not wanting to do the color alongs as much as when I can do them this way and have it go a little quicker in the editing, because I want to create more content, not create more editing. That being said, so forgive me when things like this occur, but I do change my pencils a lot, and because I tend to be and I'm working on this, guys, but I do tend to jump around the page a fair amount, and so when you're editing, that can be very tricky to make sure I'm putting my edits in at the exact moment that I change pencils. And it sounds really great, and it's not that hard, but then what happens is I'll make another little edit to a different part, and long story short, it can change, the placement of those. And so I always want it to be accurate for you guys and easy to follow. But that being said, so what I'm doing with the Albrecht Durers is, because this is really interesting to me. First of all, Albrecht Durer and Polychromos have the same names and the same colors. So warm gray 3, like I'm using here, would be warm gray 3 in the Polychromos. So that's the more traditional teaming. But you guys chose Prismacolor. So what I'm doing is I am using the watercolor pencils as a base. And for those of you that are a little bit slower colorists or have hand issues, this can be a lifesaver, because I find that I really like using either Inktense pencils or watercolor or even Neocolor 2s, because by adding a base layer, I don't have to put as many layers total of color down to get the vibrancy and the saturation that I'm looking for. So that's essentially what I'm doing with the Albrecht Durers, is I'm just laying a base layer. Now, I do kind of, when I color, I don't always have everything all fleshed out. So I knew in general I wanted this bird to have gray tones, but I use my intuition when I'm coloring to tell me, okay, I've got these colors on now, what am I missing? What do I want to add? That kind of stuff. So I apologize, I'm not the colorist that goes in and says, okay, brown ochre, what all are we going to color in brown ochre? And so I do try and do as much as I can that I know, but later on I may pull this color back in to add more of it depending on what I'm feeling as I color it. So just know that about my color alongs. One of the big goals that I have for myself for the second part of the year, so today is August 1st when I'm editing this, and I feel like this is day one of the next 6 months of 2023. And my goal is, I am an impatient colorer. I want to get done. I want to see it finished. And I'm not that person that, the video is sped up, so I don't color quite this fast. But I want to work on being a better colorist and slowing, and part of that I think is just simply slowing my work down a little bit, doing a few more light layers as opposed to my little heavy-handed self. And do I think I can change this tomorrow? No, but I do feel like I will benefit from it in the end, so that is a goal that I'm working on. Overall, I'm really happy with how this page ends up turning out, but I do understand that I am not at my pinnacle of colored pencilness. I have a lot to learn, and so I am still learning, and I am still adjusting how I do things. But I do encourage you, if you haven't used watercolored pencils, Albrecht Durer are really amazing. I could have went in after I was done with this and went over this entire page again with the Albrecht Durer's dry, and I think it would have created a beautiful picture. So I think you can do a picture full stop with just Albrecht Durer. You could have also went back in with polychromos, and like I said, they have the same colors. You could have just smoothed things out that way. But I do feel like watercolor allows you to cover a bigger range quicker. And by doing that initial base layer, I think it can really change the way that you color, because I like to put down a base layer and then color over it with a different color. So if you watch this color along, you will see that, like right now, this bird looks very yellow. Now I tend to like warm colors a little better, or I'm more drawn, I shouldn't say that, but I tend to use more warm colors than I do cool colors. I really like cool colors, and I've seen many pictures that are all done in cool colors that could be one of my favorites. But I personally, when I color, tend to like warmer tones. So here you're going to see this yellow underlayer, and then if you notice in the finished picture, I have covered it over with a different color. So this isn't going to be a yellow bird. So you're going to find in the end, I go back with some browns and some grays, and the bird overall has a brown-gray consistency. So this is brown ochre, so forgive the 96, that's just my numbering system for it. But I have brown ochre here, and I'm going over all of these things that I look to me to be leather. So as part of its helmet, and those straps and the little pieces down at the bottom. And then I'm going to go back over it with burnt sienna. Now here I started with Indian red, and I just felt like it was giving me too much of a red tone, so I switch it out. So skip the Indian red unless you like that look, and just go in with the burnt sienna. I feel like the brown ochre and the burnt sienna make a really nice leather, especially once I go over it again with Prismacolor and really, smooth it all out. It looks really nice. but I feel like these are the colors I would go with. Now once again, I just use that burnt ochre as the undertone. You don't have to do this. You can go in with just the burnt sienna and it will be fine. I find that adding that yellowish tone underneath just adds a little depth and richness to the color. But it's not necessary per se. And a lot of this is what you want your leather to look like. So to me, if I was to leave this just like this, to me that leather is still just a little on the red side. So you'll find that when we get to the Prismacolors, I'm going to cover it, excuse me, I'm going to go over it with a color probably closer to the burnt ochre. But I find that doing these layers like this is what adds that richness to your color and makes it look a little less flat. Now up here at the top, if you notice, I left that little middle piece just a little lighter. Tends to give it a little bit more of a curve. Adds just a little bit of dimension. Here too, here in a second I'm going to use pine green. And I think this was an error on my part. Pine green is not the color I was looking for. It was chromium. Let me look it up. I think the color I would use is chrome oxide green. Just simply because the pine has a little more of a blue tone than the other more olive greens that I was using. And like I said, I think it was that I just grabbed the wrong pencil. I mean, I grabbed the pencil, I found the card, I put it on there, but I think the one I was looking for is chrome oxide green. And I think later in the, as we go along, I do change that. So don't be confused by that. I wanted to talk about that. Okay, so right here, guys, don't color this green. Do not do it. That is part of the circle, the shield, whatever that thing is behind the hawk. Now this piece that I'm coloring right now, yes, I do that in green, but the piece below it, like near where the teeth of the key are, that piece should be done in the yellow tones that I use as a circle around that shield. So just know that was an error on my part, and luckily Prismacolors are pretty opaque and I was able to cover it over and you can't really see it, but it did take some erasing and multiple layers, and so I don't recommend it. I decided I wanted this piece right here to be that same leather that I used throughout. So that's all I'm doing here. So does anyone else have anything super fun that they're doing for the summer? I have more family coming next week, which I'm super excited about. My other cousin's coming and she wants to see my grandkids because her and I are like sisters. So anyway, she's been wanting to come and hopefully that'll all work out and we'll be able to see her and her husband. They're really close to me and it's a real treat for them to be able to come here. So fingers crossed everything's going to work well with that. But otherwise, I'm hoping to get another camping trip in before the end of the summer. And I'm not sure what else. All of our big vacations and stuff like that were done. We're still waiting to see how things turn out with the UPS strike and all of that. We're still waiting to really hear what all was tentatively agreed to, and then the members will vote. So keep your fingers crossed for us that that all works well. And you know, for me, the bigger thing is money's always important. My husband and I really want to support, like I have a say in it, but we feel like it's important that the part-timers that work at UPS, everybody always hears about UPS drivers and how much, you know, maybe they think they earn a lot of money, and they do earn good money for sure. They also work. Lonnie's working till probably 10 o'clock tonight. It's they often give him, you know, a day and a half to 2 days worth of work to do. So I always tell him, I'm like, yeah, you make good money, but you work a job plus a part-time job as well, because he averages 55 to 60 hours a week, and that isn't by choice. So that is something that I wish would have been in this contract, is a little more rules governing that, so that they couldn't force you to work that much overtime. So anyway, but the part-timers need to earn more. They're only working, like right now, a lot of them are making $16 an hour, and they're doing a physical job at terrible hours in the morning, a lot of them, and most of them are willing to do it for the benefits and the potential to go full-time. But often, I know my husband worked part-time for 4 years in order to make it to full-time. So that is something that needed to be stepped up in order for them to be able to, you know, to even be able to wait to go full-time. And so I was happy to see that it did go up, but I know a lot of people were disappointed that it didn't go up more. So we'll see how that all goes. But anyway, you don't care about any of that. Sorry to blather. So here, guys, I wasn't super careful about where I was putting my colors down. I wanted little pops of yellow. I wanted the darker yellow. I think you might think of a goldenrod. What is it called? Light yellow ochre. And then the Naples yellow as the little brighter pops. You know, I just wanted those little swirly majigs to be just slightly brighter than the rest of it, but not necessarily the entire thing. Like, I didn't want them to look like they were a separate unit. And then here's that olive green yellowish again. And then I come in with a darker tone at the base of the hat, and I think this is the chrome oxide green. Let's see. Be helpful if you could see that, wouldn't it? Once again, apologies. I did this tutorial. It was done in normally a sit down, and in a session or two I can do the whole thing. This was done over the course of several days and several different sessions, and so, you know, my mind's been a little scattered, so my apologies that this isn't the easiest video to follow. But basically, I just want the lighter green there in the center piece of that. And then I'm doing the darker tone on the bottom and then up the sides of the little plumes. And on the side of this belt, I go over it with that darker green just to kind of get rid of that pine green a little bit. Keeping on with that same darker green here, I'm going in to the leaves and just adding just a little bit to the tips and to the sides where the artist has shown some little darker ridges. And I apologize for the ugly green towel. That looks hideous. But I like these microfiber towels. I wipe off my water brushes and stuff, and they just work for me. So they get stained, and I wash them, and they're still stained, but they're clean, and they just work really well for me. So, but I realize that they don't look that attractive. Especially since they pick up like lint and I don't know, like bits and bobs of things. It seems like I'm not a fan of microfiber towels. Like some people like to like wash dishes. I don't really like how they feel on my hands, but when I'm just dabbing off like my watercolor brush, I just find that it works really well for me, and it does a good job of actually getting off that color without me having to like flick it back and forth several times. Whereas sometimes if I use a paper towel, it takes more than one flick to get like a dark color, like that dark chrome or the chrome oxide green. It will take me several flicks to get that completely removed, and I don't find that to be the case when I use it here. So you can use that tip or not. Here again, I'm going in and just still trying to decide how much gray do I want, how much brown do I want, and I'm trying to put in, this is kind of an insight to how my brain works, but I don't go in and color the whole bird like the grays and then add the greens and the browns. I feel like once I have some of the color of the bird, like with the green and the leather and that kind of stuff, then that helps guide me to know how to balance the rest of the picture with my grays and with other browns. Because once I have those colors on there, I don't know, it just helps me visualize where I need brown and where I need gray. And maybe that isn't how your brain works. Everybody's a little different in how they color. I also didn't want these feathers to be like my husband shoots a bow, so most arrows in a quiver are all one color, or there's a slight variance, but they're not chunky colors like I did. But that's okay because I'm coloring in a book and I don't care. But I decided I wanted more brown tones, so that's what I did. So my little grandson is still the most contented baby. Spent all day yesterday with him while my cousin was in town. My son brought his two boys over, and that was really great to see the grandkids and spend a little time with them. Jackson's really artistic, which I love. You can imagine that warms my heart. But he loves to create. He doesn't like things like coloring books because he likes to develop his own stuff. So he actually does best with just white pieces of paper. And I bought him some alcohol markers for Christmas, which he loves. This time he brought some clay, and he made a little turtle and a little couple of turtles, I guess it was. And he just entertains himself that way. Of course, like all kids his age, he likes the Nintendo Switch with the building games and those kind of fun things. So, and he's super smart on that thing. But, that's a generational thing. But I do like that he does other things like, like clay, and he has a little art station here at the house that has different colored pieces of construction paper and glue and colors and markers and whatnot, so he can build his own books. And we just give him a stapler and he builds the books himself. So he's very creative. Now, Mac, he's still, he turned 6 months, And so he's still in the doesn't do a whole lot but make us happy stage. But we all passed him around and he was super content and just very like calm, like he didn't get nervous with other people. And I guess he's a little young for the shyness stage, but there was, I don't know, what, 10 of us in the house, and somehow he got a little tired, and Nikki, my daughter-in-law, says, well, you want to lay down by me and take a nap, and laid him down, and the next, I mean, literally like 3 minutes later, he's asleep. And there is all of this, you can imagine, there's like 8 men in my house, the testosterone, the noise level. It wasn't calm. It wasn't quiet. He didn't care. He put himself to sleep. He slept 30, 40 minutes and then was up again and just as content as ever. So I'm really blessed, and I'm grateful that the kids have a baby that is that easy. And Jackson's great with him. He wanted to hold him at one point, and so even here he is at grandma's and, family in town and everything else, he was still being an amazing big brother. So very, very grateful for that. So here I have no idea what this is or what pattern. I am just simply drawing up the red into these little peaks and adding in this light yellow ochre, and then I'm going to go in with cream in the middle. And I don't know, I like how it turned out. So not sure if it was supposed to be a shield or what it is behind it, but anyway. Okay, so up next I put a little bit of red here on this jewel and a little bit of yellow, and I'm trying to decide where else I want it. I had enough color on my pencil to go ahead and do these, or on the water brush, to do a few of those berries. That's often a good way to do things that are that small, because when you add it, it's almost too much. So next up, we're going to do these little metal rivets. And I do plan on making a separate video for the metal components, because it doesn't really show in the video as well as I'm going to blow it up and just have it as isolated. But I'm going to talk about, how I do the bell and how I do the key and how I do those little bands on the bird's wrist and stuff, and discussing what makes metal look like metal and what makes it look shiny and that kind of stuff. Because too often when I color it, it just looks weird. And then I'll come back and I'll look at it later and I'll think, oh, that reads metal. But when I'm doing it, it just feels sloppy to me. So I am going to discuss that in a separate upcoming, like I did before. I'll do the full color along. I'll pop that up on the channel. And then I'll have these short little tutorials of how to do metal, how to do gold, how to do I did gold before with the gold crown, and you know, silver's much the same. You want a real dark color like a black or a Payne's gray, and then you need that contrasting white, but you also need some varying silver / gray tones to make it read metal. Now around all these little rivets, personally I find that if you just do a little tiny, like almost like the C curve on them with a darker color, that they will look more 3D, like they're popping off the leather. So here I'm just activating the watercolor. So I decided my arrow shafts should be this cool gray, what is it, 6. Sorry for my head poking in, if you can see my hairs. Now overall I want this bird's eye to be like the golden color, but his pupil was definitely dark, so I went ahead and did it with this color as opposed to the black, and then I'll go in and do a black tiny pupil. Personally, I just feel like this gives it a little more depth or realism or whatever you want to say. Here I'm adding the cream to the shield, and so I'll leave you for a minute. Okay, I'm back. So here I'm adding that brown ochre and the yellow ochre to the eye, because overall I want the eye to read gold. And then I'm putting in a darker trim around his leather piece using the burnt sienna. I feel like this color goes well. It's a part of the color that I used in the leather itself. I'm doing these little cords and the little wraps around the tassels. And here I just want this to be like kind of like this old weathered wood, and so I'm going in with my darker tones here on the underside of that rim, And I'm going to use quite a few different colors to create that. So you'll see me pop down to it as I use colors. Here I'm just deepening the sides of that quiver. So this is cold gray 4, I believe it was, that I just used. It could be any of your deeper grays. I just want to add a little bit to those areas, like the beak and whatnot. So like I was saying before, I just look at this stuff and I think, oh, I want some darker colors in there in the corners. And so I just add them as I go. And then I think, well, do I like that? And then I think, no, I want to add a little more darker tones. But once again, here I am adding the browner tones, just activating those lines that I did earlier. And then adding a little bit more of that same, I decided I wanted it to have an overall color of this brown ochre, and then I'll put more lines in with the grays, the black, and that kind of stuff as I go. My water brush wasn't putting out any water, so that wasn't helpful. I have a love-hate with these things. Sometimes I feel like they're either too much or not enough water. So around the edge of this shield, I just go in with black. I just wanted it to be really dark. And you will find that there is a little piece of black in that middle section that I missed, which I eventually get. But I'm not sure at what point I figured that out. Sometimes it's so hard when you color these images to be like, is this part of this or is this part of that? I'm sure you guys can relate to that a little bit. And then I'm going to go in and activate it. Here I am darkening up the beak, a little bit in his eye. And I really want the area between those top feathers, I want it to be dark. So I want it to look like those top feathers are definitely laying on top. Here I go in with Warm Gray 3 and just add, just randomly really, to the different feathers in the quiver. So now going in with Warm Gray 1. So I'm just varying different shades of gray in these feathers, in these arrows. And I'm not varying it too much. I want them to be subtle differences. So now I'm working on the key, and I decided for gold on the key. So I'm doing a light yellow ochre, just putting in those different lines, and then going in with the brown ochre. And this is walnut brown for anywhere that you think would be inset. So inside that little ring, along the edge, in that little where the teeth are. And I saw that I hadn't lined the leather there, so I go ahead and do that, just like I did before. So I'm going in with my walnut brown to the inside of that quiver. I just really want it to be dark, kind of indicating that it's more in shadow. Just activating these. Just saw a couple of places I hadn't activated. Now down here below, by adding the black along that rim, it really makes that rim that he's holding look 3D, because it deep sets this. That piece of wood kind of falls back. Now here I'm doing the background, and I start out with cream down here at the bottom. I then change my mind after I've done all this. So I do the cream, I guess, as almost like a base. And I'm just adding color here and there, because as I blend it, it will smooth out. So you can see I'm just being a little scribbly. Now be careful in this stage that you don't push down too hard or make too definitive of lines, because if you notice, I'm almost turning my pencil sideways because I want a real light coat. But if you go in and you make marks, those marks won't always wipe away. Now I'm using a different brush here, a different water brush, because I want a bigger water brush. And I am just putting a regular piece of paper by it just to protect that side there, and try not to get any watercolor on the side. But I do want to use a bigger water brush so that it'll smooth it out quickly, because once this dries, you can move it, but it's a lot harder. See that little mark right there? It was a lot harder for me to get rid of that mark. So you just have to be careful. Now because I've colored those flowers, I don't have to be as careful there. The wax will add a little bit of a resist. And I know that I'm, in my mind, I've kind of figured out how I'm going to color those little doodads on the side. And so I'm not being especially careful about, I'm not trying to cover them, but I'm not going to be finicky when I go over it, right? I tried not to put the color directly on it, but I'm not terribly worried about it, because I know I'm going to make those kind of a, almost like just a darker color of the background. And I'm just doing a light wash here over everything. Now this side on the left has started to dry a little bit, and so I'm able to add a little bit more color. But you want to wait until it is completely dried if you're going to add more color. So I look at this color and I was not really liking it. I wanted it richer. And so I'm going back in with that brown ochre, and I'm just adding more color. Just kind of anywhere I feel like needs more. Now if this paper isn't completely dry and I add that pencil to it, the marks will be really intense, and it's a nice hack when you want it to be that way. But if you're not wanting it to be super intense in that area, it can be permanent. It can be very hard to remove. You can see that spot down in the bottom that was a little bit wet, and it really held on to the color. And I'm kind of thinking that I'm going to go around the edges with the darker color, because I'm really wanting it darker overall. But I'm not being super careful here, because we're going to go back over everything with Prismacolor. So this, once again, is just my base layer, and I don't have to be too precise and too precious with it, because I can fix it with colored pencil. So I'm just adding that general base layer. Now I'm starting to add a little bit more detail. I decided that I wanted a little pops of red in these arrows. I don't want them to be solid red, though I think they would work if you made them solid red. It just wasn't what I envisioned when I made them, so I just put them here and there. And the little, I think the little decorative elements on the end of the fletchings is kind of funny. But once again, my background's dried a little bit, so I'm going in with a little bit of red. I wanted to bring in a little more color down at the bottom. Not a huge amount, nothing crazy, but just, I'm thinking that I want the bottom of this to be a little darker than the top. Now, do you see here where I put that mark? Now, once again, I'm not freaking out because I'm going to use Prismacolor over it, but you see it left a little mark. So just be cautious when you're doing this, that you're not creating stuff that you can't flesh out. Okay, here we're going to start with the Prismacolor. So this is where I'm starting to go over those yellow tones with the gray. You can see it kind of mutes it out, and you don't get that gray, but you don't get the yellow either. And this is already a French gray, so it already has some warmer tones to it. But I want the overall bird to be kind of this, that last color was French Gray 30. That's what I was showing you. Now I'm going in with the 50% just on the edges here of these feathers. And this right here is where I was talking about just spending a little more time, maybe blending these a little better. I think I can be too impatient when I color, but you know what? It's it's kind of who I am. Okay, so this is a 70% French gray. I do show it at the end, but it's not showing now. And I'm basically wanting to deepen the edges of the bird's head and its feathers. So I'm just going to go along the edge here. I just feel like it adds dimension to those feathers. I just now noticed that I hadn't shown you. Now you could probably skip either the 70 or the 90%. You might not need both, because these are very small areas. But the key is just to make sure to blend it out. but I just felt like it needed still a little more depth or darkness there. Now next I go in with Cool Gray 30%, and I really like the look of warm, cool, and French grays together in different variations. Sometimes I just use French and cool, sometimes it's warm and cool, sometimes it's French and cool, but I do like the combination. Now once again, I'm really trying to darken that head. I just feel like it needs to be a little darker overall. Now I'm going in with a base of 30% gray over the chest, and then I'm going to flick in some deeper colors in a bit. But I want his overall color to be that 30% French gray. And then with just a really sharp Prisma, I just want to flick in the direction of the hair or the feather these tones. And I just keep adding, a layer, and then I go to the next darker color, add a layer, and go to the next darker color. Now, is anyone going to be tricked that this is realistic fur? Nope. But it works for me for these kind of situations. Still wanting that a little darker. I'm not sure that I've achieved it, but I do like this cool gray on those little feathers, I guess they are. Just adding a little gray to his overall feel. Adding some cool gray to the feathers, the full-on feathers in his, I guess, part of his wings. So I went to the next darker cool gray, just adding a little bit more here and there. Anywhere the feathers layer, I want to add darker to the top. That will make the feathers look like, excuse me, it's mid-afternoon. The dark and then the light will make those feathers look like they're laying on top of each other. Now this cool gray 30 is kind of my base layer for all the silver, for the bell, for the rings, this little plaque thing on whatever he's holding, or perching on, I guess, is probably more likely. But just like I did with the watercolor, I go in with my base layer and then I add my darker tones. And then at the very end, I add the white with the Posca pen. And it's that contrast that really brings everything to life. Okay, so here I use black just to deepen up my darkest shadows, his eye, around the rivets. Once again, this kind of helps make them look a little more 3D. in between those feathers, also making that chest look like it sits back a little bit from those feathers there. Just making sure I have a really sharp pencil. I go along this one edge of the rivets. These are very small, subtle things, but I think overall, I guess I should say, I think they make a big difference. Now, I do put a band of black on this metal, and it's really going to help the contrast. Now, here I'm going along the edges. See how that lends to the 3D effect, and it makes that metal piece look like it's standing on top of the wood. Once again, going in where there would be divots and along the edges, I just resharpened my pencil a little because I want this to be super sharp. Because those black is very integral in making it look shiny. So here I decided I wanted to make these look like individual little feathers as opposed to just, I don't know what that was, like, I don't know, like little divots on the top. So I just kind of colored them that way. And then I decided I wanted a little more red to them, to these top ones. Not too much, so be careful that when you add these touches, if you want it to look like mine anyway, I would be careful adding too much. But then I blend it out and soften the edges using that cool gray. And I really like the look of that right next to that, whatever that was, burnt umber, burnt orange, or whatever color we were using just a second ago. So I'm just kind of going over the feathers, the gray feathers, giving them some unity in color from the Albrecht Durer. And then when I go along the little crevices here, once again, I feel like this really adds a roundness. You can see them almost become more round or more defined when you use the darker tones and the lighter tones in conjunction with each other. So I am going to leave you to it for a bit. I'm just going to kind of go over all the colors that we've done, and I'll pop back in a bit. Okay, so next I go in with this Scarlet Lake. And we're just going to cover up all of the Albrecht Durer. And then I'm trying to smooth out a little bit of these peaks and give a little bit of, I don't know, make it make sense a little bit. Like make those little rivers and valleys a little more curved here. I add some to that gemstone up there. Want to go over those little beads. Just basically anything that was red to begin with. Then I'm going to follow it up with a mineral orange and then our cream. So I'll leave you to it. Okay, so I'm back and we're nearing the end. At this point, we're touching up things, we're going in and doing our final details, kind of darkening things here and there. This is where I feel like the most magic of any picture comes. So it's these final details here in the last segment of the video where I feel like the magic really happens. Because look at the difference when you just add a little bit of the green here. We add our little highlights of black. We get in with our deeper shades. And I feel like this is what brings the drawing to life. So I feel like if you ever have a picture that you look at and you're like, well, it's meh, add more, do more, add another layer. Even if you've done 5 layers, add another layer. Because look at the cummerbund on this. I just added some dark, and I know I go back in and I add a little more chartreuse, and I feel like it really takes this from being so-so, but then watch when I add the chartreuse. That little bit of limey color just really, to me, brings it to life. It's this color that makes it sing. You know, you might disagree and you might, I definitely am kind of my pictures always look like I colored them in exclamation points, but I kind of like that. That's a little more my style. I really appreciate people that can color in muted tones. I never seem to be able to. I've always got to add that little extra something something. Which if you ever saw me in real life, like I don't dress that way, right? Like the really pops of color and bright. I'm always very conservative in how I dress and how I don't know, like I don't want to stand out in a crowd. I've never been the, okay, I'm going to dye my hair. In fact, true story, I've never dyed my hair. Not once. The closest I ever came was highlights. Is anybody else like this? I kind of feel like I'm missing a rite of passage somehow. But I just can't do it. I have like this auburn red color hair, and I'm afraid. I'm scared to, what if I don't like it? And I know you can change it, but I don't know. I've also never had a perm. I do straighten my hair. I have naturally curly / wavy hair anyway, but so I do straighten it on occasion, which I actually really like it straightened. Kind of depends on the length. Most of the time, even though I'm going to be 55 this year, I still wear it in a ponytail. It's just, I definitely kind of like function over appearance, and so I think that's why I'm so gregarious with coloring, is because in real life I'm not the bright loud colors. I'm more the muted tones and the conservative. So maybe that's what it is. I don't know. Maybe I'm just insane, like crazy person. But anyway, just like I did with the watercolors, I added in the darker browns and I added in little pops of the really bright canary yellow, just randomly. And now I'm going over all of it, even the bright colors and the browns and everything, with goldenrod. And I just like how the brighter colors kind of pop through the goldenrod and give it a little bit of a two-toned appearance without it being over the top two-tone. You could definitely just do all one tone if you want. Now I'm deepening up the edge of this red because I want it to feel a little inset. Like I want that yellow to look more like a frame. Or maybe not a frame, but... And guys, on this red, yellow, and cream, like you could do, I think, a gradient, like a very smooth gradient from red to cream with adding all the different layers, like adding your yellow orange, your mineral orange, your yellow orange, then a Naples yellow, then a canary yellow, and then lemon yellow, and then cream or whatever, something like that, I think would look really good. I just wanted it a little more distinct than that. I wasn't really looking for a gradient, but in looking at this, I probably could have made the orange to red either more consistent or more gradient there, and then opening up into the cream. But I'm not unhappy with it. It's just the style that I chose to do. Now here, remember we talked about how I wanted this to be, look weathered and kind of rustic. So I'm going in with some of the darker, like red tones and brown tones, and just kind of filling this in, all keeping in mind like a wood grain. I maybe could have even put in a knot in this wood grain, but I didn't. But I am going to go in with probably, well, first I go in with the golden tones and kind of fill it out. But I know that I go in on the left-hand side with some of those darker tones, like almost like black, almost like it's dirty. I want it to be very just weathered and dark. So yeah, here I am with sepia, which is kind of a gray brown, right? So we're going in and we're really emphasizing that ridge, and then just how kind of aged it is. And I just keep going back and forth with the colors until I get something that I like. I don't really have a, well, like a formula or a recipe. This is just like, hey, I think it needs more of this, and so I add it, and then I add a little bit more. So adding a little bit more of the French gray to both the bird and the feathers, just kind of filling in where I don't have any, where it's been remaining white, and where I feel like it needs to blend a little bit. Now I'm going in with the darker color. Really at this point I am starting to touch up, so I'm going to leave you to it until we get more to the clouds. So I really didn't know what I was going to do for the clouds, and in the end I decided I was just going to do a nice combination of cream, yellow ochre, and scarlet lake. And so, or maybe poppy red. We'll see which red I used. I can't remember. But basically, I am going in, I went over it almost the entire thing with a cream. Then I took this yellow ochre and I'm just going around where the little lines are to the clouds and kind of like where the other clouds touch them. And then I chose poppy red, so in the end it was poppy red. The reason being is because I don't really want it to compete with my shield, and my shield is that Scarlet Lake, so it's a deeper red. So I wanted something that was a little more orangey red, because my goal with this is that this is going to just be a softer look overall. And so then I just kind of repeat the process in reverse, kind of backpedaling now from the red. I'm going back to lemon. What is that? Yellow ochre? No, lemon. Sorry, yellow ochre, and just kind of blending things out a little bit, like working my way into the cloud, smoothing it all out. Prismacolors are really good for this. They don't require that you do a whole lot to blend them. And then back to the cream for the lighter area, but I am going over the entire cloud with the cream. So just blending everything. I'm using probably a medium pressure. This isn't super light, but I'm not like bearing down on it either. But I'm using this more to blend it all out. So not a final burnishing, but definitely enough pressure to do some blending. Then I decided I wanted it blended a little too much and I needed a little bit more pop of color up there. So going in with the red, or the poppy red, and just kind of repeating the process. For the final step, I'm just taking some of the gold colors that I used earlier, the light umber, the canary yellow in the shield, right, and the goldenrod, and those are the colors that I'm going to use on these, whatever these little doodads are, the little decorative elements. So I go over everything with the canary yellow, just adding a little brightness, which you can hardly see, but it does make a difference, because had I not done that, the next colors would have darkened it even more. And then I'm going in with mineral orange, and I'm just adding touches of orange. I'm not doing the entire metal, but just here and there. And then going in with the light umber. Now the light umber, I don't know, I would say going over the vast majority of it, of the little heart part. Then there's those little 3 circles. I'm not doing anything with those at this point. And then I'm adding a little bit of sepia just to that inside edge, just to make it pop off the page a little bit, because it's kind of fading in a little more than I would like. And I feel like that sepia does a pretty good job, and so I go ahead and tuck it a little bit in the right hand corner as well. And not the same on every one. So using terracotta, I'm coming in and doing these little berries. Now it's up to you. I really thought about doing a really bright red, just like the other berries. I really didn't want it to compete with my picture. So that's why I used the terracotta. And then I go in with the Posca pen and I go over the stars and all the little white dots with white. I thought that added a nice element. So look for at least one tutorial on, I might do one on the leather. I don't know, I'm torn, because sometimes I feel like my tutorials, like I don't know that it's really good enough for full-on tutorials. Like, I appreciate you all following me so much, and I like how my pictures come out. I just don't know that I'm like, should I really be doing tutorials? Tell me what you think, honestly, because like if you go to a tutorial on YouTube, like a short tutorial, not like a color along, because a color along is just that. You've already seen what I've colored, you liked it enough to click on it, so I'm okay with that. But I mean, if I'm going to do like a 5-minute thing, like my pearl or whatever, like these aren't realistic pearls, but I feel like it adds value because I think that it can be something useful. But I don't want to be I don't want to be presumptuous, and I don't want people to click on my tutorial and think, why would I want mine to look like that? I don't know. Am I being weird? I think I'm being weird. It's an hour and 45 minutes into this video, so I think I'm losing it. So I'm going to let you go for now. My final step here is I take a Derwent blender pen and I just decide to blend out a little bit of the brush strokes. Now, you could certainly do this throughout the entire thing, but I only do it on the background just simply because, you know, there were brush strokes, and this simple little gesture just to me makes it a little more painterly, and I like the effect. So do this if it interests you. You could definitely do what I'm aiming to do in this next 6 months, which is maybe slow down and add another layer of Prisma and smooth it out that way. But anyway, that's all for now, and I will see you on the next one. There will be one grandchild picture at the end if you're interested. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.